Hey folks, David Stewart here. I'd like to talk again a little bit about one of my books. This one here, the characters. I want to talk about the characters this time. In this book, Eyes in the Walls, I talked about the setting in another video, so now I'll talk about the characters. If you remember that pyramid, setting, characters, and plot. So the setting is the time and place where it takes place. I specifically said this before: cell phones and the internet, and the characters live in that setting. They arise out of that setting. So the characters in this book are very much Gen Y characters, Generation Y characters, my age cohort, roughly late 70s to late 80s. The main character, Billy, would be a little bit on the earlier side of that spectrum. If you want to know more about Generation Y, if you're younger or older, or you just want that perspective, you can check out a free collection. It's totally free. I'll link it down below. It's edited by J.D. Cowan. It includes essays by myself, Brian Niemeyer, and J.D., as well as stories. Things that we basically talked about on our blogs in response to each other for a couple of years that paint a good picture of what that age cohort was about and why its perspective is unique compared to maybe those that are a little older and those that are younger, the millennials. So anyway, the characters here are definitely very much Gen Y characters, and in order to tell the story, you really need that perspective. Part of it is childhood isolation, being underparented, being alone and independent a lot of the times, which Gen X can probably relate to as well. Having a lot of material, fun things like Game Boys and comics and stuff like that. But really just kind of being disconnected from adults. That's the big relationship break that drives the story, is that the children and the parents are on two sides of a very wide divide, and the parents are not really able to understand the children, and the children seem to be very absent the influence and protection of the parents. So Billy is the main character. He's the protagonist. He comes from a broken home, which many of my peers came from divorced parents. So a really common thing for lots of people even today. You live 5 days of the week with mom, you live the weekends with dad, and you're always switching back and forth between these two homes. You have one set of things that exist at mom's house, a different set of things that are over at dad's house. So different feelings associated with each one. Billy is haunted and fearful at his mom's house. But he goes to his dad's house and he's no longer haunted. He's no longer fearful. He feels relaxed and he feels at home. He feels safe at his dad's house. So there's very different feelings associated with each place. And of course, there's his two parents, and they have very different sort of vibes that go with him. And they're on the adult side of that divide. And one of the things about them is that Billy's mom is very busy. She runs a funeral home, and so that keeps her very busy, and so Billy's underparented. During the week when he should be with his mom, he takes the bus on his own to the funeral home where he's supposed to hang out with his mom until it's time to leave and go home. But he's turned loose to his own devices a lot of the times to hang out with his cousin Jeff. Jeff is another one of the characters on the child divide. And there's really this gang of characters that surround Billy and reinforce and facilitate him to do what's necessary in the plot. They're all kind of more extreme examples of the underparented child, going to the point of delinquency. So one is Jeff, that's Billy's cousin. And Jeff's mother is really absent. She's maybe drinks too much. She doesn't pay attention to her kids. Billy gets left with that, non-present mom while Billy's mom goes and does other things that she needs to do. She relies on her sister to babysit Billy, which she doesn't do. And Billy and Jeff are basically free to do whatever they want to do, to go wherever they want to go and be as independent or as delinquent as they want. And that gets reinforced by a pair of brothers, John and Mikey. Now, John is older. He's basically a Gen Xer in high school. And he has a car, and he facilitates Billy and Jeff to go investigate the reality of the monster that lives in Mother's, basically the morgue at the funeral home. So that's a really important set of characters there. The adults are missing. They're not really involved with these kids, and they're kind of raising each other. They're kind of learning from each other without a lot of parental influence. And that allows them to go on this adventure. They wouldn't be able to go on that adventure if they were some younger cohort and this took place in some later year, because their parents would actually be keeping a tighter leash on them. But my generation, we were either in daycare or in a lot of cases we were just turned loose. So we'd get out of school and there'd be like no adults. You know, the buses would leave, the parents would go back in the classroom, and you could just wander around an empty neighborhood. That's kind of how it was back then. Just a completely different attitude towards how kids should be parented and what kind of control you should have over them. Now, there's one more kid who balances out the whole kid group, and that's Anna. It's Billy's sort of love interest. It develops into that. Now, she balances the group out because Billy and his parents, they're non-religious. They don't go to church anymore. Billy's father basically tells him when he confronts him about religion that like he doesn't believe in the truth of any religion and doesn't want to impose that on his kids, and has kind of a hippie mindset about that. Well, Anna's very religious, and she comes from a religious household. She's Catholic. She is really important because she believes Billy. Billy is experiencing things that are supernatural, and she believes that they're real. She believes that he's actually experiencing these bad things, that there maybe are demons involved. She believes in the supernatural. She believes in spiritual warfare. She's the true believer archetype. I've talked about different kinds of character archetypes. Billy's really an everyman. Anna, the love interest, is not a best friend. She's a true believer, and the true believer is really there to balance out the non-believers. And the non-believers in this case are all the adults, which I'll get to in a minute. But Anna really believes him, and that's where their affection and their friendship is able to grow from, is that belief in the supernatural. And she also likewise helps Billy to confront the reality of the monster that lives in the basement. Now, the monster's name is Danny Fisker. At least that's what they believe his name is. And as they uncover some history, they start to learn that there really was somebody named Danny Fisker. And maybe it's the monster in the basement, maybe it's not. You'll have to read the book to really find out. But Danny Fisker as a monster is an interesting sort of character as well, because he starts off as a force of nature. Usually in a monster story, the monster is not an antagonist. Like if you watch Alien, the alien is not the antagonist. The alien is not plotting against the people. He's just a force of nature. It's chaos. It's pure chaos. It's like a wolf or a bear. A bear is not an antagonist. It's just something that's going to eat you. It's uncontrollable. So it starts off that way, but as the story progresses, Danny Fisker, or who they believe is Danny Fisker starts to haunt Billy. And the other kids are having bad dreams about him as well, but Danny's actively haunted by this creature. So the creature really begins to cross over a line into being an actual antagonist, something that's actually actively harming Billy. So I find that to be an interesting character. Now, you have to read to find out exactly what happens to Danny. So you can buy that book and read it. Now, the adults are the non-believers here. And this is because there was this big divide between kids and adults where our baby boomer parents really were very disconnected from a lot of us. Now, I had very good parents. A lot of my peers had very absent parents. But one thing that was really very common was a belief that the medical establishment could just somehow fix what was wrong with the kids. So when Billy believes that Danny Fisker is real, the mother's response is to get him medicated, to take him to a psychiatrist and get him medicated. She takes him to a psychiatrist named Dr. Grant. And Dr. Grant is a psychiatrist and looks at this and says, I think he's suffering from schizophrenia, and puts him on medication for that. Now, medication for schizophrenia is a very serious thing, especially when you start on it. It can really zap you. And so it completely knocks Billy out, and he's not really able to function when he's having to take this medication. But for our generation, lots of kids were on, it was like the ADD generation. Every other kid was on ADD medication, ADHD, attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So they gave the kids really powerful stimulants. Disoxin, which is methamphetamine, very common. Ritalin, obviously, or Adderall, very powerful stimulants, really as powerful as cocaine. If you were to take them as the same way as cocaine, they would have pretty much the same effect, or the same effect as methamphetamine. And disoxin is methamphetamine. It's chemically methamphetamine. It's not an analog. It's not like meth. It is meth. And so lots of kids were literally on meth. Their parents put them on meth because they weren't behaving in the classroom. They weren't paying attention. They weren't focusing on their tasks. They weren't sitting at their desk like nice little monkeys for 8 hours a day. And they got put on ADD medication to try to bonk them out. So this was a really, really common response of our parents, was to take kids to the doctor and be like, "What doctor, fix this?" And their attitude towards the medical establishment, that you go to the doctor and the doctor fixes whatever's wrong with you. They may have gone to the doctor and gotten amphetamines themselves to lose weight at one point, So it's that's just the way that the attitude was. And so Dr. Grant's not a bad psychiatrist. He's not a bad guy, but he's not someone who approaches Billy on Billy's level and is like, maybe what you're experiencing is real. Likewise, we have Father James, a Catholic priest who has some experience with exorcism. Now, exorcism is a real thing. Exorcists are real people that actually do exorcise demons. And he comes to the conclusion that this is probably not demon affliction or possession, because it doesn't match these other ways that you usually see demons exist. And that's something that exorcists, I think, are, as far as my knowledge, are trained to do as well. He's not being possessed by a demon. He's having these visions of this monster, so that doesn't quite fit. He says it could be, but it's probably not. So again, even though he is, like Anna, a believer in the spiritual warfare side, he doesn't really believe him. He's not bad at all. He just doesn't think that this really fits the criteria of what he's been trained to do. And so he just doesn't really know how to deal with Billy. He doesn't know what to do with him. He treats him in the most compassionate way that's possible. He prays for him. He does the things that he thinks is supposed to help him, and really kind of relies on God to do that. But he is on that adult-kid divide. Likewise, mom and dad are on that divide. They don't really believe the stories about Billy. And the principal who really helps Billy and just like lets him kind of be bonked out and facilitates what he's doing is not going to really believe in a monster either. He's just trying to do the best thing for the kid, and isn't really getting down to the kid's level to see the reality of what Billy's actually dealing with. So those are the characters in the story, and the function that they perform. And I really couldn't have written the story and had the same effect without the time and place and these characters arising out of that time and place. If we were to put it 10 years in the future and you had cell phones and internet, it'd have to be a different story. 10 years in the past, parents and their relationship with their kids would have been totally different, as well as the school. It just would not have been the same kind of story. The story could really only happen in the time and place that I've said it, because these characters are really born from that time and place more so than they could be in a different time and place besides 1991. So anyway, that's it. Eyes in the Walls. You can check that out. And there's some other characters I didn't mention. One who's kind of on the adult side, who is a police detective, and he really does kind of believe Billy. His name is Sal. And he's the one at the end of the story who crosses that divide and says, I believe you, Billy, but here's the reality of things. Like, here's why I believe you, and here's what's actually going on, and I figured out the truth. So he's like the truth revealer, and he's not the true believer. He's not a disbeliever. He's a good guy in a good sense. He's the only adult that really ends up coming to Billy on his level and really caring about Billy at the end of the story. So I like him as well. His name's Sal, and he's one of my favorite kind of characters in this book. A really likable character at the end of the story. So thanks so much, guys. You can check that book out if you haven't read it, Eyes in the Walls. In fact, I think the whole audiobook is available free on YouTube. So I'll see you guys next time. Have a great one.